There are moments when life feels unusually quiet and moments when it feels unbearably loud, but then there are moments when everything feels suspended. You're still showing up, still praying, still believing, but something in your spirit knows that what was can't remain the same. Heaven has a way of rearranging things before it reveals what it's building. God doesn't always announce transformation with fireworks. Sometimes he whispers it through discomfort, disruption, and divine interruption. If you felt stretched, unsettled, or strangely expectant, it may not be because something is going wrong. It may be because God is about to change everything. And before he does, he leaves clues, not to confuse you, but to prepare you. Today, we're learning how to recognize the signs that heaven is moving, even when the earth looks unchanged. Before God changes everything, he usually changes what you're comfortable with. Comfort is not evil, but it is dangerous when it convinces you that growth is optional. God loves you too much to let you settle into a version of life that limits the fullness of what he placed inside of you. So he begins to disrupt what feels familiar, not because he is angry, not because you failed, but because comfort can become a ceiling disguised as safety. When God is preparing a shift, he will allow the very things that once soothed you to start suffocating you. You'll notice it first in subtle ways. What once energized you now drains you. The routines that used to make sense start to feel heavy. The environment that once felt like home suddenly feels too small for your prayers. You're not ungrateful, you're just growing. And growth has a way of making old rooms feel cramped. God will let you feel that discomfort because if you stayed comfortable, you'd never question whether there's more. Disruption is often misunderstood as destruction, but God is not tearing your life apart. He's loosening your grip. He knows that if he handed you the next season while you're still clinging to the last one, you'd try to carry both and collapse under the weight. So he begins by shaking what you thought was stable, not to make you insecure, but to make you available. Comfort can make us loyal to places God already left. Sometimes the disruption shows up through people. Relationships that once flowed effortlessly now feel strained. Conversations feel forced. Alignment feels off. It hurts because familiarity makes us assume permanence. But God never promised that every connection would last forever. Some people are assigned to you for preparation, not destination. And when God is ready to move you, he will allow the grace to lift so you don't mistake access for assignment. Other times, the disruption shows up internally. You can't shake the feeling that you're meant for something different, even when you can't name what that something is. You feel restless, but not reckless. Dissatisfied, but not defeated. That internal tension is often the evidence that God is calling you out of maintenance mode and into movement. Comfort maintains, but calling requires motion. We often pray for change but resist discomfort, not realizing they travel together. You can't ask God to enlarge you and expect him not to press on the walls of what contains you. Expansion always applies pressure. If you never feel stretched, you're probably not growing. God uses discomfort as a divine alarm clock, waking you up to the fact that this season has extracted everything it can from you. What makes this phase challenging is that God rarely explains himself while he's disrupting your comfort. He doesn't give you a 5-year plan or a detailed map. He gives you tension and trust that you'll follow him through it. Faith is often built in moments where clarity is absent but conviction is loud. You don't know where you're going, but you know you can't stay where you are. Comfort is predictable. Calling is risky. And God will always choose your purpose over your preference. He will interrupt routines, disturb complacency, and dismantle false security if it means positioning you for transformation. The Israelites were comfortable in Egypt in ways that made them forget they were enslaved. God had to disrupt their normal to lead them into promise. If everything in your life feels too neat, too controlled, too predictable, you may not need deliverance, but you may need disruption. God is not impressed by how well you manage what he never assigned you to keep. He's invested in how willing you are to move when he says it's time. And when God is about to change everything, he will make staying feel harder than stepping out. Discomfort forces you to seek him in ways comfort never required. It pushes you into prayer that isn't polite but desperate. It causes you to listen instead of assume. It humbles you enough to admit that what worked before won't work now. That humility is fertile ground for transformation. So when you feel unsettled, don't rush to rebuke it. Sit with it. Pray through it. Ask God what he's preparing you for instead of begging him to restore what he's already outgrown. Disruption is not the enemy. It's often the invitation. And if God is making you uncomfortable, it may be because he's making room for something that requires more faith, more courage, and more obedience than comfort ever did. When God is about to change everything, resistance often intensifies, and that's where many people get confused. We assume opposition means we missed God, chose wrong, or moved too fast. But resistance doesn't always signal rejection. Sometimes it signals relevance. The enemy does not waste energy fighting what poses no threat. Increased resistance is often proof that what you're stepping into matters more than what you're stepping away from. There are seasons when things flowed easily, doors opened without effort, and favor felt effortless. Then suddenly, as you commit more deeply to purpose, everything feels contested. Simple tasks feel heavy. Progress feels slow. You're praying more, believing more, yet encountering more pushback. That tension doesn't mean God withdrew his hand. It often means you're closer to the center of his will than you've ever been. Resistance has a way of exposing how deeply you believe what God told you. When everything affirms you, faith feels optional. But when opposition rises, faith becomes necessary. God allows resistance not to stop you, but to strengthen you. What you fight for, you value. What you endure for, you protect. Resistance builds spiritual muscle that comfort never could. Many people quit right before breakthrough because they misinterpret friction as failure. They turn around at the very point where perseverance was about to produce fruit. But scripture shows us that opposition often accompanies divine movement. Moses faced Pharaoh. David faced Goliath. Esther faced annihilation. Jesus faced the cross. None of that resistance meant God wasn't present. It meant heaven was advancing into contested territory. Resistance clarifies your calling. When pressure comes, motives surface. If you're chasing applause, resistance will exhaust you. If you're chasing obedience, resistance will refine you. God uses opposition to strip away superficial commitment and reveal whether you're anchored to his voice or addicted to validation. When the crowd thins and the noise rises, only conviction sustains you. Sometimes resistance comes through people who don't understand your obedience. Familiar voices question your direction. Trusted connections express doubt. It hurts because you expected support, but God is teaching you how to stand without consensus. Calling doesn't always come with agreement. Jesus was misunderstood by his family before he was recognized by the mass. Approval is not the prerequisite for obedience. Other times, resistance is internal. Fear rises. Doubt whispers. Insecurity grows louder. That internal battle doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're stretching beyond what's familiar. Growth always confronts identity. You're becoming someone you've never been before, and that process will challenge how you see yourself. Resistance within is often the sound of old limits breaking. God allows resistance to teach you discernment. Not every closed door is the devil, and not every open door is God. Pressure forces you to pray instead of presume. It slows you down just enough to listen closely. Resistance refines your hearing so you don't move impulsively but intentionally. When everything is easy, we rely on momentum. When things are hard, we rely on God. There's also resistance that reveals timing, not denial. God may confirm the promise while delaying the manifestation. That delay isn't punishment, it's preparation. Resistance matures your character so your gift doesn't outgrow your integrity. What God is building in you during opposition is often more important than what he's building through you afterward. The mistake is assuming that God's will always feels good. Obedience often feels heavy before it feels holy. Jesus sweat blood in the garden not because he lacked faith, but because obedience carried weight. Resistance does not cancel calling. It often accompanies it. The presence of struggle does not negate the presence of God. If everything is fighting you right now, ask yourself whether you're standing at the edge of something significant. Hell doesn't panic over stagnant believers. It resists movement, growth, and obedience. The pressure you feel may be confirmation that you're disrupting something that was never meant to stay comfortable. God will never lead you where his grace can't sustain you, but he will lead you where your strength must depend on him. Resistance pushes you into reliance. It teaches you to pray when you'd rather quit, to trust when you'd rather retreat, and to stand when walking away would be easier. So don't confuse resistance with rejection. Don't interpret opposition as abandonment. If God brought you to it, he will bring you through it. The weight you feel may not be pushing you back. It may be anchoring you deeper. And the resistance rising against you may be the clearest signal that heaven has already endorsed what you're becoming when God is about to change everything. He often starts by closing doors you prayed would stay open. That's one of the hardest places to trust Him because we tend to equate open doors with favor and closed doors with failure. But God does not close doors to punish you. He closes them to protect you from futures that would cost you more than you're willing to admit. A closed door is not God changing His mind about you. It's God revealing His mind about where you no longer belong. We get attached to doors because of what we invested on the other side of them. Time, effort, loyalty, history. And when those doors shut, it feels personal. It feels like rejection. But many times it's actually rescue. God sees outcomes you can't predict and consequences you can't calculate. What looks like loss to you may be deliverance in disguise. He is far more concerned with alignment than access. Redirection is uncomfortable because it requires release. You can't walk into what's next while dragging what's over. And God knows that if He doesn't close certain doors firmly, you'll keep revisiting them emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So He shuts them completely, not because He's cruel, but because partial closure still leaves room for hesitation. Finality is sometimes the kindest thing God can give. There are moments when doors close suddenly without explanation, no warning, no transition. One day it's there, the next day it's not. That abruptness can shake your confidence, but it also reveals where you've been placing your security. God will not allow you to build your identity around something He never intended to be permanent. When a door closes quickly, it often means God is trying to keep you from negotiating your obedience. Sometimes the door doesn't slam, it slowly stops opening. You push, but it won't budge. You pray, but nothing changes. You try harder, but the grace is gone. That's often a sign that the season has expired. Grace has a way of lifting quietly. What once worked effortlessly now requires strain. God is showing you that the oil has moved, and striving won't bring it back. Redirection doesn't always come with clarity. God may close one door before showing you the next one. That gap can feel terrifying. We prefer transition with visibility, but faith doesn't need a full map, just a next step. God is teaching you how to trust Him without needing to see the outcome. If He showed you everything at once, you might cling to the promise instead of the provider. We resist redirection because it challenges our plans. We had timelines. We had expectations. We had mental pictures of how things were supposed to unfold. But God is not obligated to fulfill the version of the future you imagined. He's committed to fulfilling the purpose He designed. And sometimes that means rerouting you entirely. Closed doors also expose misplaced loyalty. When something ends, you discover whether you were loyal to God or to the role, the relationship, the recognition. God will close doors that tempt you to compromise who you're becoming just to preserve what you've been. You cannot step into a new identity while defending an outdated assignment. Redirection often feels like delay, but it's rarely wasted. God uses detours to develop depth. What you learn in the reroute prepares you for what the destination will demand. If God allowed you to arrive too soon, the blessing would outpace your maturity. So He redirects not to slow you down, but to strengthen you. Sometimes the closed door reveals how much you've outgrown what was once right for you. What fit before no longer fits now. Your capacity has changed. Your discernment has sharpened. Your hunger has shifted. God is not taking something from you. He's acknowledging that you're no longer who you were when you first walked through that door. The hardest part of redirection is letting go without resentment. It's easy to replay what could have been, to romanticize what ended, to question what you did wrong. But not every ending is the result of a mistake. Some endings are evidence of obedience. God is more invested in where you're headed than where you've been. When doors close, God is not pushing you into uncertainty. He's pulling you into alignment. He is narrowing your path so your purpose doesn't get diluted. Redirection is proof that heaven is involved in your journey, that God is actively steering your steps instead of passively watching you wander. If something has ended and you don't understand why, resist the urge to force it back open. What God closes cannot be sustained by human effort. Trust that if the door closed, the assignment shifted. And if the assignment shifted, provision will follow. God never redirects without already preparing the next place, the next people, the next version of you that can carry what's coming next. When God is about to change everything, He often pulls you away from the crowd before He places you before it. Isolation is not abandonment, though it feels like it at first. It's separation with intention. God isolates not to punish you, but to prepare you for elevation that requires clarity, strength, and dependence on Him rather than applause from people. There are seasons when the invitations slow down, the phone gets quiet, And the circle gets smaller. People who once had constant access to you are suddenly distant, uninterested, or unavailable. It feels personal, but it's often purposeful. God knows that too many voices can distort discernment. If everyone has access to you, everyone has influence over you. Isolation limits noise so you can hear him clearly. Elevation requires transformation, and transformation requires privacy. God does some of his deepest work when no one is watching. Before David faced Goliath, he faced lions and bears alone. Before Jesus launched public ministry, he spent 40 days in the wilderness. Before Joseph wore a crown, he wore chains. Isolation is often the classroom where character is developed before credibility is granted. We resist isolation because we equate visibility with value. But God is not impressed by how many people know your name. He's invested in how well you know his voice. When God isolates you, he's detoxing you from dependence on affirmation. He's teaching you how to be secure without applause, confident without consensus, faithful without feedback. Isolation also exposes unresolved wounds. When distractions are removed, what you've been avoiding surfaces. Memories resurface. Insecurities get louder. Doubts become undeniable. That discomfort isn't regression, it's healing in progress. God isolates you so he can address what crowds helped you ignore. Elevation without healing would only magnify pain. Sometimes isolation comes through misunderstood obedience. You obey God, but people don't understand the shift. They assume you changed, became distant, or think you're doing too much. In reality, you're being refined. God will allow you to be misunderstood so you don't build your identity on being understood. If you need everyone to get it, you're not ready to carry it. Isolation also builds spiritual stamina. When it's just you and God, excuses disappear. There's no one else to lean on, blame, or hide behind. Prayer deepens. Worship becomes intimate. Faith matures. You learn how to stand when no one is cheering and trust when no one is confirming. That kind of strength can't be developed in constant community. This season can feel lonely, but loneliness and isolation are not the same. Loneliness says no one cares. Isolation says God is close. If you lean into him, you'll discover that what felt like separation is actually intimacy. God often removes human props so you learn how steady he is. Isolation is also about protection. Not everyone can handle the version of you that's emerging. Premature exposure can invite unnecessary criticism, jealousy, or spiritual attack. God hides you so what he's building in you doesn't get damaged before it's finished. There are things that must be nurtured in secret before they can survive in public. The danger is trying to escape isolation too early. We rush back to noise because silence feels uncomfortable. But if God placed you in this season, leaving prematurely can delay the process. Isolation has an expiration date, but only if you allow it to do its work. Avoiding the lesson extends the season. When God isolates you, he's also redefining relationships. He's showing you who can walk with you into the next season and who can't. Some connections won't survive the shift, not because of conflict, but because of capacity. Elevation changes proximity. God never isolates you to keep you hidden forever. He isolates you so when he reveals you, you're ready. Ready to lead without ego, serve without insecurity, and carry influence without losing integrity. Isolation is the one where calling develops muscle. If you feel alone right now, don't assume you've been forgotten. You may have been selected. God often removes you from visibility so he can strengthen your foundation. And when the time comes, the same God who called you aside will call you forward, fully formed, deeply rooted, and prepared to stand where isolation once trained you to kneel. Before God changes your circumstances, he often changes how you pray. Your prayer language begins to shift before your life does. What you once asked for no longer feels sufficient. The prayers that used to satisfy you now feel shallow, incomplete, almost uncomfortable to repeat. You find yourself pausing mid-prayer, unsure of what words to use, not because you lack faith, but because God is stretching your spiritual vocabulary. At first, this shift feels confusing. You're still praying, but it feels different, less scripted, less rehearsed. You're no longer just asking God to fix situations or bless plans. There's a deeper hunger rising, a desire not just for answers, but for alignment. You start praying prayers that sound less like requests and more like surrender. Not because you've given up, but because you're being invited higher. When God is preparing change, he moves you from transactional prayer to transformational prayer. You stop approaching him only for what he can do and start seeking him for who he is. Your prayers move from God, give me, to God, from open this door, to close anything that's not you. That shift is subtle but powerful because it signals that your heart is being prepared to carry something heavier than you've ever held before. You may notice that you pray with more honesty than polish. You're not trying to sound strong anymore. You're not editing your fears. You're not masking your exhaustion with spiritual language. You tell God when you're tired. You tell him when you're confused. You tell him when obedience feels costly. This rawness is not immaturity, it's intimacy. God cannot heal what you won't expose, and he cannot lead what won't listen. Your prayer life also becomes quieter, less talking, more listening. You begin to realize that clarity doesn't always come from saying more, but from hearing better. Silence stops feeling awkward and starts feeling sacred. You wait, you linger, you sit with God instead of rushing out of his presence with a list of demands. That stillness is where direction is often deposited. Another sign of this shift is that your prayers stop centering around other people's approval. You stop praying for validation and start praying for courage. Courage to obey when it costs you comfort. Courage to walk alone if necessary. Courage to let go of what feels familiar. God changes your prayer language because he's changing your priorities. Sometimes your prayers feel incomplete. You don't even know what to ask for. So all you can say is, Lord, And surprisingly, that becomes enough. Romans talks about groanings that words cannot express. Those moments are not prayer failures, they are spiritual depth. When you don't have language, the Spirit intercedes. God understands prayers that haven't fully formed yet. You may also notice that you stop praying for God to remove pressure and start praying for him to increase capacity. You stop asking for escape and start asking for endurance. That's a sign of maturity. It means you're no longer trying to avoid the process. You're asking God to make you strong enough to walk through it. As your prayer language shifts, your tolerance for surface level faith decreases. You're no longer satisfied with cliches or borrowed convictions. You want truth that holds up in hard places. You want faith that sustains you when outcomes are uncertain. God deepens your prayer life because shallow faith cannot sustain major change. This shift can feel lonely because not everyone understands the kind of prayers you're praying now. You're not dramatic, you're discerning. You're not losing faith, you're refining it. God is teaching you how to partner with heaven instead of just petition it. Your prayers become more future, focused than present, fixated. You begin praying about who you're becoming, not just what you're facing. You ask God to guard your heart, sharpen your discernment, align your desires. Those are prayers that prepare you for longevity, not just relief. When prayer changes, perspective follows. You start seeing obstacles differently. You stop panicking as quickly. You stop assuming delay means denial. Prayer reshapes how you interpret life. God adjusts your language because language shapes expectation, and expectation shapes faith. If your prayers sound different lately, don't rush to correct them. Don't force old words onto a new season. Let God teach you how to speak to him from where you are now. This shift is not random. It's preparation. Before God changes what surrounds you, he changes what flows from you. And when your prayer language shifts, it's often because heaven is preparing you for a level of responsibility, clarity, and intimacy that your old prayers were never meant to carry. When God is about to change everything, favor starts showing up in places you never expected it to. Not the kind you chased, planned for, or positioned yourself to receive, but the kind that finds you while you're simply being obedient. It catches you off guard because it doesn't match the effort you invested or the logic you understand. That's how you know it's divine. Favor that comes from God doesn't always arrive through the doors you prepared for. It often enters through the ones you didn't even knock on. This kind of favor feels almost uncomfortable at first. You question whether you deserve it. You replay the moment in your mind, trying to figure out what you did to earn it, and you come up empty. That's because divine favor is not a paycheck for performance. It's a tool for purpose. God releases favor not to reward ego, but to advance assignment. When he's ready to move you forward, he will use people, opportunities, and moments that make it clear he orchestrated it. Unlikely favor often comes from unlikely people. Someone who barely knows you speaks your name in a room you've never entered. Someone with no emotional obligation to you extends generosity without explanation. Someone who shouldn't have access opens a door you didn't have the credentials to unlock. That's not coincidence. That's God bypassing systems so you don't confuse his hand with human hierarchy. This favor doesn't always look flashy. Sometimes it looks like timing that works in your favor when it shouldn't. Protection where there should have been consequence. Access where there should have been restriction, mercy where judgment was expected. These quiet moments of favor are just as powerful as public ones because they reveal that God is involved in the details, not just the highlights. What's interesting about unusual favor is that it often appears during seasons of pressure. You're tired, you're stretched, you're questioning, and right there, in the middle of uncertainty, God releases favor as reassurance, not to make everything easy, but to remind you that you're not doing this alone. Favor becomes God's way of saying, keep going, even when the path doesn't make sense yet. This type of favor also tests your humility. When doors open quickly, pride tries to take credit. God watches how you carry what he gives you. Favor is not just about access, it's about stewardship. How you handle unexpected blessing determines whether it multiplies or stops. God releases favor to see if you'll remain submitted when elevation becomes possible. Unlikely favor often exposes who's truly assigned to your next season. Some people celebrate it, others resent it. Favor has a way of revealing hearts. Not everyone who clapped for you in preparation will cheer for you in promotion. God allows favor to surface so separation can occur without conflict. Alignment becomes clear when favor is visible. This favor may not come where you feel most qualified. It might show up in areas where you still feel insecure. God does that intentionally. He wants you to rely on him, not your expertise. When favor exceeds confidence, dependence deepens. You learn to pray differently, walk carefully, and listen closely because you know you didn't get here by skill alone. There are moments when this favor feels inconvenient. It interrupts your plans. It requires courage you didn't think you had. It demands decisions before you feel ready. But favor rarely waits for comfort. It arrives when purpose needs movement. God doesn't always prepare you fully before he positions you. Sometimes positioning is what prepares you. Unusual favor is also temporary if mishandled, not because God is unstable, but because favor flows where obedience continues. Favor follows alignment, not ambition. When God opens doors through unexpected channels, he expects you to stay sensitive to his voice because familiarity can make you careless. If favor is appearing in strange places right now, don't dismiss it because it doesn't look like what you imagined. God is not limited by your expectations. He is creative with provision. He will use unfamiliar routes to get you where you need to go so you don't idolize the process more than the promise. This kind of favor is not meant to make sense to everyone. It's meant to move you. It's confirmation that heaven is involved in your transition. When God is about to change everything, he will let favor find you in places you never searched, through people you never depended on, at moments you never planned for. So you know without question that what's happening is bigger than you and guided by him. When God is about to change everything, what once fit your life comfortably begins to feel restrictive. Things you used to wear easily, roles, routines, relationships, environments, start pressing against you in uncomfortable ways. It's not that they suddenly became wrong, it's that you've outgrown them. Growth has a way of making old spaces feel tight, and God uses that tension to signal that expansion is necessary. You may notice that you're still functioning, but you're no longer fulfilled. You're doing what you've always done, but it feels heavier now. The joy that once accompanied it has thinned out. That doesn't mean you're ungrateful or rebellious. It means your capacity has increased and the container hasn't changed. God never allows increase without eventually requiring adjustment. Restriction often shows up emotionally before it shows up externally. You feel boxed in mentally. Your vision stretches beyond your current reality. But your environment can't support what you're seeing. That disconnect creates frustration. But frustration is not always a sign of discontent. Sometimes it's evidence of development. God allows you to feel the limits so you'll stop trying to force growth in spaces that can no longer hold it. What once felt safe may now feel confining. Safety becomes stagnation when it prevents obedience. God doesn't want you trapped in what used to work if it now hinders who you're becoming. He allows the fit to change so you don't mistake familiarity for faithfulness. Just because something is comfortable doesn't mean it's correct for this season. This restriction also exposes misplaced identity. When a role feels tight, you realize how much of your worth you attach to it. When a relationship feels limiting, you see how much validation you drew from it. God allows restriction to reveal where you've been sourcing identity instead of receiving it. You can't step into a new identity while clinging to old definitions of yourself. Sometimes you try to adjust the old thing to make it work. You tweak it, stretch it, compromise it, hoping it will fit again. But God doesn't want you altering outdated assignments. He wants you transitioning into new ones. Forcing what no longer fits only delays the inevitable and drains your energy. Restriction can also feel like boredom. You're not challenged anymore. You're not learning. You're not stretching. Boredom is often the sign that a season has taught you everything it can. God doesn't waste time, and He doesn't keep you in classrooms you've already mastered. When growth stops, movement is required. What makes this season difficult is that outwardly, everything may look fine. People may not understand why you feel unsettled. From the outside, it looks like stability. But inside, you know you're shrinking to stay where you are. God will not ask you to diminish yourself to preserve peace. He is more interested in your obedience than your comfort. Restriction is God's way of shifting your appetite. What once satisfied you now leaves you empty. Conversations feel shallow. Goals feel small. Vision feels bigger than your current access. God is rewiring your desires so you won't settle for less than what He's prepared. This tension is not meant to torment you. It's meant to move you. God allows you to feel the squeeze so you'll stop nesting in spaces meant only for transition. Expansion requires release. You can't carry new wine in old skins without rupture. If your life feels tight right now, resist the urge to numb it or normalize it. Pay attention to it. Ask God what you've outgrown and what He's calling you toward. Restriction is often the evidence that growth has already happened internally, and now external change is required. When God is about to change everything, He lets what once fit begin to press on you, not to crush you, but to push you into a space that can finally hold who you're becoming. When God is about to change everything, time starts to feel different. There's a sense of urgency that settles in your spirit, but without clear instructions attached to it. You feel like something needs to move, something needs to shift, yet you don't have the details to justify the pressure. That tension can be unsettling because we prefer urgency with explanation. But God often accelerates awareness before He accelerates events. This urgency doesn't come from panic, it comes from purpose. It's not anxiety-driven, it's alignment-driven. You're not afraid, but you're alert. You become more sensitive to wasted time, misplaced energy, and unnecessary distractions. Things you once tolerated now feel too expensive. God sharpens your discernment around timing because the next season requires focus. What makes this urgency challenging is the lack of clarity. You want to plan a timeline, a confirmation email from heaven. Instead, you get a nudge, a restlessness that won't go away, a sense that delay could cost you something, even if you can't articulate what that something is. God is teaching you to move by obedience, not by full understanding. Urgency often shows up as an internal push to prepare. You start organizing what you ignored before, praying more intentionally, letting go more decisively. Conversations feel more purposeful. You're not rushing, but you are intentional. God is aligning your habits with what's coming before He reveals the full picture. This season also exposes procrastination. Things you've put off suddenly feel pressing. Forgiveness can't wait. Obedience can't be delayed. Comfort can't be prioritized. God creates urgency so you don't carry unnecessary weight into the next season. Timing matters more than talent, and delayed obedience can complicate divine transition. At the same time, clarity remains partial. You know movement is required, but direction unfolds in pieces. That's not God being vague, that's God being relational. He wants you to stay close enough to hear the next instruction when it comes. Urgency keeps you dependent. Clarity in portions keeps you humble. This urgency also refines your decision-making. You become less interested in options and more committed to obedience. You stop entertaining distractions disguised as opportunities. Not everything that opens is aligned, and urgency helps you choose wisely rather than widely. There's often grief in this season because urgency signals endings as well as beginnings. You sense that some chapters are closing, even if they haven't fully ended yet. That awareness can be heavy. God doesn't rush you emotionally, but He does prepare you mentally so transition doesn't catch you off guard. Urgency without clarity forces trust. You can't lean on logic alone. You have to rely on discernment. God is strengthening your ability to move when He says move. Even if the destination isn't fully visible yet, that kind of faith can't be developed in slow, predictable seasons. If you try to suppress this urgency, you'll feel internal resistance. Not because you're disobedient, but because you're misaligned. God's timing is precise, and when He activates urgency, He's inviting cooperation. Ignoring it can create unnecessary frustration. This urgency is not meant to overwhelm you, it's meant to awaken you. God is tuning your spirit to His pace. He's teaching you how to move with heaven instead of dragging your feet behind it. When the moment comes, you won't need convincing. You'll already be ready. If time feels louder right now, pay attention. God may be repositioning you for a sudden shift. Urgency with unclear details is often the final signal before movement. When God is about to change everything, he stirs your spirit first. So when the door opens, you recognize the moment and step through it without hesitation.